Thank you all for being here. This is the second time that I have had the privilege to introduce the recipient, and in this year, the co-recipients of the Bulletin's 2018 Leonard M. Rieser Award, 19, I should say. As John mentioned, throughout my father's life, he was immersed in science, in academia, and in the public policy issues that concern the Bulletin. After studying physics at Dartmouth College and the University of Chicago, he was sent in 1944 at the age of 22, one day after enlisting in the Army, to work on the Manhattan Project at Los Alamos with Robert Oppenheimer and the other renowned physicists of that era. My mother ran the nursery school at Los Alamos, and they were there until the war ended. It was because of that experience and the existential threat that the proliferation of atomic weapons posed for all living things that my father became an advocate for encouraging young scientists to find ways to influence public policy. It was also because of his experience at Los Alamos and hearing the deafening explosion and watching from a distance of only 10 miles the huge cloud of fire and smoke rise over Alamogordo that he greatly valued the association that he had for many years with the Bulletin, which provided the opportunity for scientists and others, and now students, to discuss and debate these issues. That is also why my siblings and I have enthusiastically supported the Bulletin's Leonard M. Rieser Award. I doubt that my father would ever have imagined that something would be named for him. And he would have been very proud of this year's award recipients. It is our family's hope that the award will continue long into the future. The Rieser Award is a key element of the Bulletin's Next Generation program, as John mentioned. Its purpose is to provide new voices engaged in science and public policy with a trusted platform from which to address the world's greatest threats and challenges. When I learned that the 2019 Rieser Award would be given to Erin Connolly and Kate Hewitt, I read their essay and immediately understood why. It is exactly what my father would have wanted. And they are the kind of proactive thinkers and problem solvers that the award was meant to support and encourage. As you can see in your program, Erin Connolly is the Associate Program Director at Girls Security and a 2021 Master's candidate at the University of Notre Dame's Keough School of Global Affairs. Kate is a federal contractor at the National Nuclear Security Administration and an advisor for global security. Their award-winning Bulletin essay, entitled, quote, "American Students Aren't Taught Nuclear Weapons Policy in School. Here's how to fix that problem," describes how they first became interested in nuclear weapons policy and their surprise at discovering that their peers lack even the most elementary awareness of what is at stake. Erin and Kate set out to change that. After educating themselves, they conducted 22 classroom presentations involving more than 1,000 students, describing the fundamentals of nuclear weapons and the costs and risks they pose for their generation. Here are a few excerpts from what they wrote. Quote, "The next generation is constantly bombarded by news, alerts, and social media updates. When it comes to nuclear policy, however, young Americans are almost completely unaware of the choices to which they are tacitly consenting. For the public to be engaged in nuclear policy debates, education is critical. That is our mission, to provide students and the public with tools they can use to make informed decisions regarding their money and their future. Fewer than 1% of the students we surveyed knew which countries had nuclear weapons. The knowledge gap between the public and policymakers has become too wide, and we are here to narrow it, unquote. I would add that the knowledge gap between scientists and policymakers is also too wide. In fact, I doubt that most members of Congress, with the exception of those here, could name the countries that have nuclear weapons. And I suspect that only a handful know how many of what types, what yields, what delivery systems each nuclear weapon state possesses. In today's political environment, when decisions as consequential as the deployment or the withdrawal of U.S. armed forces are made by tweet with no consultation or debate, and when scientific facts and principles are supplanted by politically expedient misinformation, an informed public is all the more important. It is up to each generation to hold their elected officials accountable, especially when it comes to decisions like withdrawing from arms control treaties and inciting new nuclear arms races in the world of 9 nuclear weapon states and others that aspire to be. My father would have strongly agreed with Erin and Kate. In fact, their mission was his mission, and it is as relevant, probably more relevant today than it was during his lifetime. I feel it every day working in Washington, and it is reassuring to know that the next generation not only sees the problem, but wants to fix it. I want to thank the Bulletin for establishing this award in honor of my father, and ask that you all join me in welcoming to the podium Erin Connolly and Kate Hewitt.
So thank you, Thank you, Mr. Rieser, for that very kind introduction and for your family's continued support of young people and nuclear issues. And we would also like to say a huge thank you to the Bulletin for having us here tonight and giving us an outlet to share our work and a platform to share our story. It's a privilege to be here with you all.
We are honored to be recipients of the Leonard M. Rieser Award, in part because it is such a humbling thing to be recognized for a project that Erin and I feel so passionately about, but also because it validates that the nuclear community understands the importance of what we are trying to accomplish.
As part of the next generation, we appreciate those who have supported us, our ideas, and our passion for nuclear policy. But we are not the last next generation, and the support cannot stop with us. We recognize that for the foreseeable future, the public will require consistent engagement on nuclear policy, and we are trying to create a movement that capitalizes on the energy of the current youth. Gen Z has already proven their investment and engagement with existential risk through climate change, and we want to make nuclear policy a pillar of the existential risk conversation moving forward, as many of us heard about in the talks here today. Our personal story begins at a dive bar in DC. We met at a happy hour aptly named Gin and Atomics, and it was for, it's as nerdy as it gets, and it was at a happy hour for young people interested in nuclear policy. And we instantly bonded over our passion for nuclear policy, public education, and the desire to get things done. Since we were fairly new to the nuclear field, we saw it through a different lens. We were acutely aware of how little we knew about nukes before we entered the field, of how members of Congress, except for those present, generally could not care less about this existential issue, and how little our friends and family knew about the topic, let alone our careers, despite our best efforts to pepper them with the latest nuclear news. But one thing seemed obvious to both of us: how much we wanted to engage with others about nuclear policy and share our passion.
Our project, Educating the Next Generation on Nuclear Policy, is a product of our passion for this field, both its history and its future. We created a presentation that covered the basics, like what a nuclear weapon is, why the US originally pursued this technology, which countries had nuclear weapons, and how many did they actually have. We wanted to present this information in a nonpartisan, no bullshit kind of way, treating students like agents of change who deserved to be given enough information to form their own opinions and engage with this rather daunting topic beyond the headlines. As policy nerds and conscious individuals, Erin and I do not agree on everything. But we do agree on the importance of providing the next generation with the foundation to engage on nuclear issues, to create a more informed electorate and dialogue, even among those who do not agree. In fact, especially among those who disagree, and especially right now. I grew up in Richland, Washington. My hometown produced the plutonium that was used in the bomb dropped on Nagasaki in World War II. My high school's mascot is a mushroom cloud. Accurate response. My entire life, I was surrounded by the legacy of the Manhattan Project. But the basics of nuclear weapons, the policy debate surrounding their existence and their use, the environmental impacts, a rational discussion of deterrence, I knew almost none of this. And that's coming from a girl who interned at a nuclear energy facility in high school and wrote about becoming the first woman president in middle school. So what about other students? Did anybody else know?
So with this, in the spring of 2018, we journeyed to Eastern Washington, to Kate's hometown, heading to 4 high schools, 1 university, and delivering 22 presentations. In hindsight, spending 7 straight days with someone you've only met a couple of times was a big risk. But thankfully it went well, thanks to a lot of coffee, some excellent wine, and a good sense of humor, and we're still on speaking terms after all. And as Kate mentioned, Richland, Washington played a pivotal role in the American nuclear history. And I never learned about nuclear issues in high school either, but I had assumed that this was because my hometown had no connection to nuclear history, and that's why I had gone back to my high school the year before. Overall, we found teachers to be receptive to having us speak, and we hypothesized that students in the Manhattan Project town would be somewhat aware of nuclear issues. So we decided to test this hypothesis with the quiz seen here. And it's a relatively short quiz, and the last question we didn't count for anything. We just wanted to know if people were interested. And it turns out that we were wrong about our hypothesis. We were quite wrong. And so while students did not necessarily know the answers to these questions, we found them to be incredibly engaged on Nuclear Weapons 101. And they asked questions that challenged our own assumptions, but mirrored questions that we had asked only years earlier, questions that many of us stop asking as we become tangled in the weeds of policy. And honestly, students ask the hardest questions. As part of my job at the Center for Arms Control, we spoke with members of Congress and their staff on nuclear issues, but high school students were the ones to often stump me. They don't share the same assumptions that we do, and instead they approach nuclear issues in a novel way, and it's a novel lens that our field could really use right now. For instance, one student asked us why no one sanctioned the United States for developing nuclear weapons while we were sanctioning everyone else for doing the same. We were consistently asked about the shield protecting the United States from nuclear weapons, also known as missile defense. And we heard things from the United States shooting nuclear weapons at incoming nuclear weapons, which is an idea that we thankfully dropped, or the force field that just surrounds the United States, kind of like Star Wars. And we were also asked, why didn't we just nuke North Korea once and for all? So working through these questions in a common language, English, and meeting students where they were, we could see students engage, and they even put down their cell phones, which is the ultimate compliment from a high school student.
Erin and I are not the only ones that are recognizing that the next generation can and should play a pivotal role in the nuclear policy sphere. Organizations like N Square are investigating new ways to approach these issues through various projects like making interactive resources available to students, teachers, and the general public. Girl Security is empowering girls to participate in various issues of national security by redefining it for themselves and then giving them the tools and skills necessary to be engaged. And organizations like the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists are tirelessly investing in new ideas and new people by giving a platform to the voices of the next generation. Our dream would be for state and federal education policies to adopt curricula that reflects the reality of our nuclear policy, past and present. No one should be graduating high school completely unaware of such an existential risk. Education is not always glamorous, and it is definitely hard to find time to do this critical work in addition to our regular day jobs. But we, as a community, cannot give up. Now is the time to keep building on this momentum. Current crises like that with North Korea, a potentially unrestrained US-Russia relationship with no cap on nuclear arsenals, the future of the Iran nuclear deal, and the development and emergence of innovative and disruptive technologies are all reason enough to begin engaging with the public right now. We need better policy and more informed politicians, which starts with a more informed electorate. You are all here tonight because you believe in something so much bigger than yourselves. But what matters is not what we say here in this room tonight, because this is not the room that we need to convince. It's what happens after we all leave. So Erin and I are calling upon each and every one of you to ask yourselves, when time is of the essence, are we doing enough to prepare the generations of tomorrow?
Thank you.
Thank you.